Level 1. Picciotto. You are 19 years old and you work a fruit stall on Via Bandiera that your uncle has run for 30 years. And the most interesting thing about you, as far as anyone in Palermo is concerned, is that you don't talk much. That turns out to be the entire audition. A man named Nino Sciarra buys oranges from your uncle every Tuesday. And one Tuesday, he asks whether you'd like to earn something extra carrying an envelope across town. And you say yes without asking a single question about what's inside it, which is the correct answer, and the only one that would have led anywhere. You find out years later that 3 other boys on that street were asked the same question that same month, and that all 3 of them asked what was in the envelope, and that none of them were ever asked anything again. For 8 months, you carry things. Envelopes, packages, messages spoken out loud and never written down. You learn to sit in a parked car for 4 hours, watching a door, and describe afterward, precisely, everyone who went through it. You learn that Nino never says anything twice, so you listen the first time. You learn to walk a route 4 different ways and notice which of the 4 has a new car parked on it. You learn that being early is a form of respect and being late is a form of statement, and that you are not yet anybody who gets to make statements. Then one morning, he tells you the bakery on your own street is yours to collect from, and you walk in expecting the worst afternoon of your life. It is the easiest money you have ever made. The baker has paid the pizzo for 11 years. The envelope is ready before you finish saying good morning. He asks about your uncle's knee. You ask about his daughter's wedding. Nobody threatens anybody. Nobody raises a voice. And you walk out into the sunlight thinking that every man who ever feared this life simply failed to understand how it actually works. That thought lasts about 4 weeks. It is, you understand much later, the single most dangerous thought a young man in this life can have, because it is not entirely wrong, and the part of it that is wrong is the part that kills people. Level 2. Soldato. They make you in a back room with the shutters closed, a candle, a saint's card burning between your fingers, an oath about a body of flesh and a body of ash. You are 21. Nino stands as your sponsor, which means that from this night forward, anything you do badly is partly his. A fact he mentions to you once, lightly, on the walk out, and never mentions again. You mean every word of the oath, and the meaning it has for you that night is not the meaning it will have 20 years later, but nobody tells you that part, and you would not have understood them if they had. 2 weeks later, you are handed the hardware shop on Via Roma. New owner, mainlander, been open 5 months. He says no. Not angrily, not defiantly, just no. The way a man says no to a charity he isn't interested in because he genuinely does not understand what is being offered to him. And here is where you make the mistake that shapes the next 4 months of your life. You get loud. You do it in daylight, in the doorway, with the shutters up, in front of a woman buying paint who now knows your face and roughly what you are. You knock a display of tools onto the floor and tell him what happens to men who don't listen. He goes white. It works, in the narrowest possible sense, in that he is now frightened of you. It fails in every sense that matters, because he is frightened of you specifically on a particular Tuesday in front of a witness, rather than quietly certain of something in general. Nino has to fix it. Fixing it costs the family a favor with somebody they did not want to owe, and the shop pays now, but it pays because Nino asked quietly a week later, not because you shouted. Your punishment is not a beating. Your punishment is being taken off collections entirely for 4 months, which is worse because everyone knows why. Nino explains it exactly once, in a car, not looking at you. The pizzo is not about the money. The money is nothing. The pizzo is about a man never once seriously considering that there is an alternative to paying it. The moment you shout, you have admitted there's a conversation to be had. A shop that pays because it is afraid of one man is a shop that stops paying the day that man is arrested. A shop that pays because paying is simply what happens on the first of the month will still be paying in 30 years. You are, Nino says, in the business of the first of the month. You meet Rosa Alaimo at a cousin's wedding that same year. She runs a florist 2 streets from the cathedral. She has no connection to any of this, and you tell yourself that's exactly why it will work. She asks what you do. You tell her you're in supply and distribution, which is not a lie in any way you could be caught out on, and she looks at you for slightly too long, and then lets it go. And that moment is the whole relationship in miniature, though it takes you 11 years to see it that way. Level 3. Capodecina. Head of 10, though in practice it's closer to 19. Your own crew, your own territory, and you discover that you are considerably better at this than you were at collections, because the real business is not fear at all, it is arrangement. Which nightclub buys its beer from which supplier? Which company cleans which hotel? Which men work which doors on Friday night and which don't? Nobody gets hurt in any of it. Contracts simply arrive where they are supposed to arrive, and every party in the arrangement makes money, and the family takes its share off the top of an economy that never appears in any ledger. You learn the rhythm of it, which is nothing like collections at all. A dinner, a phone call from somebody who owes somebody. A supplier who suddenly finds his delivery schedule has changed and does not ask why. It is, on any given Tuesday, indistinguishable from ordinary business, and that is precisely the point of it. You are good at this. You are patient in rooms where other men are not. You spend a whole year building the club business into something worth twice what it was. And Don Calogero Ferrante, who has run this family since before you were born, starts asking your opinion in front of people whose opinions he has been asking for decades. The first time it happens, you understand exactly what has been done to you in that room, publicly and deliberately. And you understand that half the men present now regard you as something to be watched rather than dismissed, and that this is not entirely a gift. Then you make the second mistake, and this one nearly ends you. You authorize one of your men to lean on a bar in Paso di Regano over an unpaid supplier arrangement, and the bar turns out to sit under a different mandamento entirely. Territory. There is no version of this that is a small problem. Don Calogero settles it himself. In a room you are made to sit in and say nothing during, and the settling costs him something real. Afterward, he tells you that he did not do it for you. He did it because a war over a bar would be stupid, and that you should understand the difference between those two things for the rest of your life. It is the coldest thing anyone has ever said to you, and it is also, when you take it apart later, the most useful, because it is the first time somebody has explained to you plainly that you are an asset with a value and not a son. Level 4. Consigliere. It reads like a promotion and feels, for the first 6 months, like being put in a drawer. No crew, no earnings of your own. You advise, you arbitrate, you sit between men 20 years older than you and tell them which of them is being unreasonable, and they have to accept it because the seat says so. You hate it for a season. You are 30 years old, you have run a crew, you have doubled a business, and you now spend your Tuesdays telling 2 men in their 50s which of them is wrong about a debt from 1979. It is, you eventually realize, the most educational period of your entire life. You learn where the money actually sits, which is never where the noise is. You learn which men are dangerous because they're violent, which is a small number, and which are dangerous because they're frightened, which is most of them. You learn to read a room by who looks at whom before answering. You learn that in 9 disputes out of 10, both men already know who is right and are simply waiting for somebody with a chair to say it out loud so that nobody has to lose anything by admitting it themselves. It is in this period that Maresciallo Bevilacqua starts appearing. Carabinieri, patient, unhurried, the kind of man who is clearly playing a longer game than anyone he is currently investigating. A raid finds nothing. A second raid, 8 months later, finds something small but real. Turi Mancuso, who came up alongside you and who earns more than you now, starts making remarks about your clean hands where he knows they'll be repeated. You do not respond to any of them. Not responding is itself a decision, and you make it deliberately, every single time, and you keep a private and very accurate count. Level 5. Sottocapo, Underboss. You are 34, and there is one man above you in the family. Real power, and with it, the specific exposure that comes from being the man who runs things while somebody else remains the man who decides them. You are, for the first time, genuinely visible to people whose entire job is looking. You change cars twice that year. You stop using the same restaurant more than once a month. You develop the specific habit, which never afterward leaves you, of memorizing the exits of a room before you have finished sitting down in it. Rosa is picked up on a Tuesday morning in a sweep that is not even primarily about you. She has driven your car. She has held keys to a lockup she believed was for stock. She has passed on messages she did not know were messages. Bevilacqua sits across from her and explains correctly that she is looking at 12 years, and then explains that there is an alternative. And Rosa, who is 31 and has never been inside a police station before that morning, takes the alternative. She is not brave and she is not a coward. She is a florist who has been told, accurately, that she will be 43 the next time she sees her mother, and who is offered a door and who walks through it, which is what almost anybody would have done and what almost nobody in this life is permitted to say out loud. You find out before the family does. That is the entire tragedy of it, compressed into one fact. There are 48 hours in which you are the only man in Sicily who knows, and you spend them understanding, slowly and completely, that there is no version of the next week in which you are both a man of honor and a man she survives. You consider, in those 48 hours, every single alternative. Money, a boat, a name in a different country. You take each one apart in your head and find the same flaw in all of them, which is that you would have to disappear alongside her to make any of them work, and that the man who would do that stopped existing somewhere around the third rank. You go to Don Calogero, you tell him. He does not ask how you feel about it, because the question would be an insult to both of you, and he does not make you do anything, because that would be a crueler thing than what he does instead, which is to tell you to go home and stay there. There is a mercy buried in that instruction that you do not recognize for years, and when you finally do recognize it, you are not grateful for it, because the mercy is only that you did not have to be present, and you were never going to be present, and both of you knew it before you walked into the room. You go home, you stay there. A car leaves that evening, and you hear it go. In the morning, the florist 2 streets from the cathedral has its shutters down, and they stay down, and 11 days later, somebody else's name goes up over the door. You stand across the street from it for a long time on a Thursday afternoon, and you do not go any closer. And that is the last thing you ever do about Rosa Alemo. Nobody in the family ever mentions her name to you again. Not once, not obliquely, not in 20 years. That silence is meant as a kindness, and it functions instead as the loudest thing in every room you enter for the rest of your life. Level 6. Rappresentante. Don Calogero has a stroke in his own kitchen 14 months later and is gone before the ambulance reaches the end of the street. And the family becomes yours in a vote that takes 11 minutes because everyone already knew. You are 36. You have everything you spent 17 years climbing toward, and it arrives in the exact season in which you have stopped being able to feel any of it, which is a joke so specific you have to assume somebody designed it. The vote itself is the strangest 20 minutes of your career. Men who watched you carry envelopes at 19 stand up one at a time in a farmhouse outside Corleone and say your name, and you sit there hearing it and feeling almost nothing at all. And you spend the drive home wondering whether that hollowness is grief or simply what arriving feels like. You are a good boss, better than Don Calogero in the ways that can be measured. Earnings up. Arrests down, because you understand something he never fully did about how Bevilacqua's kind of patience actually works. Turi Mancuso is now openly your rival. And openly is the dangerous part, because a rival who is quiet is a problem you have time to solve. Turi is not quiet. He says things at dinners. He says them in front of men who report dinners. You give him 18 months of rope, and you are careful, throughout all 18, to be visibly generous to him in public. Level 7. Capomandamento. 3 families under you now, your own and 2 others, and a district that runs from the port to the edge of the new construction in the north. This is where the money becomes serious enough to stop resembling money. Public contracts, concrete, entire buildings that exist because you agreed they should. You sit in rooms with men who have never committed a crime in their lives and who need 3 signatures moved forward by a fortnight, and the conversation is so polite and so careful and so completely understood by everybody present that it would be almost impossible to explain to an outsider what has just been agreed. The Turi situation resolves in the spring. You arrange it, you do not attend it. Nobody is required to explain to you where he went, and you are careful, for the rest of your life, never to ask. It is the cleanest thing you ever do, and it is not clean at all, and you are entirely aware of the distinction, and it changes nothing about the fact that you did it and would do it again. Level 8. The Commissione. A seat at the provincial table, the room every man in this life pretends not to think about and thinks about constantly. 9 men in a shuttered room deciding what the whole province does and does not do. You are 43, you started with an envelope and a fruit stall, and there is not one man at that table who came further than you did. 2 of them were born into it. 4 of them started higher than a fruit stall. You know all of this because you make a point of knowing it, and because on the days when the chair feels heaviest, it is the only thing that makes it bearable. They talk about a construction dispute for 2 hours. You say very little, because saying very little at that table is what got you the chair. Afterward, you drive home the long way, which takes you past the cathedral and past a florist's shop that has had somebody else's name over the door for 7 years now. Every rank of this you earned. That's the part nobody warns you about. Not one of these promotions was luck, or a vacancy, or somebody above you falling. You were patient, you were quiet, you were better at it than the men around you, and it worked exactly the way it was supposed to work, and it took everything it was always going to take. You climbed 8 ranks in a system that never once lied to you about what it was. The shutters came down on a Wednesday. That's the only part you'd change, and it's the only part you never could.